No bail for SBF, FTX's former CEO, charged with a whole slew of crimes. We went through all of them, read the formal indictment out of SDNY. We read the CFTC complaint along with the SEC complaint, and SBF is looking at a whole lot of problems. Now, he was ultimately arrested. We know that he was in the Bahamas and that the Southern District of New York made their announcement, made their indictment, but there's a little bit of a problem, right? He's kind of outside of the United States jurisdiction, so to speak. And so there's a big question about what happens, right? Okay, so the Southern District of New York might really want this guy, but do the officials in the Bahamas care at all? Well, they did, actually. They got action underway and they actually arrested him. So you can see SBF here in this GIF was arrested. We've got multiple different angles that we'll take a look at. We'll also meet the judge. Her name is Judge Joyanne. She denied bail. We'll look at the extradition hearing, see what the White House, Congress, and Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, had to say before we dive fully into the defense from SBF. He was going to prepare a bunch of statements to Congress. He got arrested before those statements could be made. Some people say very conveniently, and we'll go through it all. So let's start at the top and savor the moment. Sam Bankman-Fried getting arrested. Of course, people asking what the heck took so long. The government has been meandering around for some period of time, and we know it does take time to, generate indictments and to do your investigation and so on. But here it finally is. SBF walked out in the Bahamas, escorted by police into the back of unmarked vehicles, presumably being taken to jails and facilities in the Bahamas.
We're seeing some activity. Police officers, we can see Sam Bankman-Fried in a blue suit and a white shirt being walked to the vehicle. He is in handcuffs. He's been placed into the back seat of this blue Ford vehicle. He was surrounded by police officers as he was walked out. In the drone shot that you were looking at, you could have seen him being put into that police vehicle. I think that a lot of questions need to be answered, whether it be from the National Security Minister, from the court system, from anyone who presided over what happened here today. Why was this man seemingly given preferential treatment?
Interesting. So even that anchor is saying, yeah, why was he given preferential treatment? Now, there's a big debate about this, obviously. A lot of people think that he wasn't giving preferential treatment. Some people, at the New York Times and stuff, they're still sort of papering this whole thing over. Like, well, he's a nice guy. The whole thing kind of just, it went bad, but it wasn't criminal. I mean, stuff goes bad all the time. I mean, haven't you ever knocked over, a cup of water on your desk, right? Sometimes accidents happen and, we should just give him a second chance. He did, after all, funnel maybe $1 billion to Democrats. We can probably look the other way. So Sam arrested, put in the back of the vehicle. Not a whole lot of activity, obviously. I was kind of hoping maybe he'd come out with a machine gun or a machete or something. You never know. The dude is nuts. But this is another angle of SBF being walked out. This is what looks like maybe a courtroom or some other building. SBF is going to make his way around the corner. He's escorted by all sorts of law enforcement officials, put in the back of the police vehicles, and escorted off straight to jail.
Anything you'd like to say?
Now, we'll get to Sam's statement. He was set to appear in front of Congress and deliver that statement. Here's one other angle, just for those of you who had some money in FTX, just to make sure that we can make sure it's actually him. A couple different angles spliced together here. Close up, SBF walking out at the front door, a little zoomed angle there. And he'll come right around the corner. There he is. Looks a little uncomfortable, certainly.
왜 그래서 나와 그래.
So they're just hanging out now. That guy's got a machine gun. Nice. So it looks like it's a repeat kind of the same angle. And then there the vehicles are being escorted out. All right, so SBF escorted off by the police in the Bahamas, and they took him in front of a judge. Let's meet the judge. SBF's Judge Joyanne is the judge who denied him bail. You can see we know a little bit more about her. I found this article from October 21st, 2013. Joyanne Ferguson Pratt is the name of that beautiful woman that you saw, was confirmed as a chief magistrate yesterday, back in 2013. Chief Justice Sir Michael Barnett announced that the Governor General acted on the recommendation of another judge. She was appointed to act in the Bahamas, was called to the Bahamas Bar, February 1988. Wow. So she's been a lawyer for quite some time. She served as the Office of the Attorney General until February 2011. She was transferred to the Magistracy to serve as magistrate. Sir Michael said that he was pleased with the appointment. Sir Michael said, Miss Ferguson Pratt will provide strong leadership as we seek to make the magistrates' court system more responsive to the needs of the Bahamas. Outstanding. So we love to see that. So shout out to Judge Ferguson Pratt. You can see here outstanding outfits. Love the ensemble. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like that here in Arizona, but maybe we can start a trend. Now, the question is, what happened at the bond hearing? We know that bond was denied. A clip from an article over on a crypto website told us that the Bahamas Chief Judge Magistrate, Joyanne Ferguson, who we just learned about, on Tuesday denied SBF's petition to be released. And he only wanted to be released on a $250,000 bail, which is like, I mean, honestly, chump change. We talked previously when we read through the full complaint that came, I think, from the SEC, that they were alleging that he stole, can I be so bold to say allegedly stole $136 million in personal loans, right? He just said, oh, I kind of need your money now. And he took that $136 million. So just divide $136 million by $250,000. It's like tip money, all right, literally. So denied the Bankman's petition to be released, instead ordered Bankman to be sent to the country's Department of Corrections. Oh, yes. Man, that stings. Earlier, Bankman-Fried's legal team had declared in the Bahamas Magistrate Court that he would fight extradition to the United States, should it be requested, which obviously it will. Ryan Pinder, the Bahamas Attorney General and the Minister of Legal Affairs, he said in a statement on Monday that his office was notified that the U.S., quote, is likely to request extradition. So pretty obvious on that one, right? Makes all the sense in the world. So now the question is, what will the formal process look like? And, you know, I'll be honest, right? A little bit of me as a criminal defense attorney, you know, I do not like it when people are arrested, right? It's a traumatic thing. Like, there are people that probably care about this guy who are going to go through difficulties and have troubles. You know, I also don't endorse, you know, stealing $40 billion or, you know, doing anything that he did. But, you know, when these things happen, right, it's a bomb that goes off. So, like, it's a tragedy, right? So you can be sort of happy that justice is being brought. But at the same time, it's like, man, I wish none of this stuff ever happened, you know? So I just sort of, I feel for the extended explosion. Like, there's a blast zone that happens. And this is a young guy, right? It's a 29-year-old guy. I don't know what the heck happened here, but his life's basically over. And, you know, we don't know what the consequences of this are. And so I just want to make a quick note on that. Now, we'll continue on. Of course, we know a little bit more about the judge. And the judge is basically done until we have the extradition hearing, but that's not scheduled until sometime in February. But the question is about extradition, right? So is Sam ultimately going to be extradited? The U.S. government wants him. We saw that here. We see that they are going to request his extradition, but Sam's lawyers are going to contest it. So what does that mean? Are we going to actually be able to get SBF back in the United States? This is the treaty between the United States and the Bahamas regarding extradition. You see, this is titled Law Enforcement. It was signed back in 1990 from the Department of State of the United States of America. Now, there's a note here saying that the Department of State had approved July 8th, 1966, that treaties and other organizations are... Can you hear Leaf Blower Guy out there? Leaf Blower Guy is right out here. Can you hear him? He always comes right at the showtime, doesn't he? Can you guys hear him? All right, well, we'll just keep going. He's out there. You can see the note by the Department of State. They're basically saying we have the authority to do this because the Constitution says so. We have some brief history of what the Bahamas have in terms of how this progressed. 1990 was when the treaty was signed. It entered into full force 1994. Now, this is where the legal splicing comes into play. Extradition treaty between the government of the U.S. and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The government of the United States and the government of the Bahamas enter into this treaty. They say that we recall a prior treaty back from 1931, mutual extradition of criminals, that was signed by the U.S. and Great Britain, signed back in London. And both of the governments of the U.S. and the government of the Bahamas currently apply the terms of that treaty. So they're carrying that over historically. And desiring, they say, both of these countries desire a more effective cooperation between the states to suppress crime. And they say a new extradition treaty is appropriate. And so the contracting states agree, the U.S. and the Bahamas agree, right? This is like a contract between countries to extradite to each other, pursuant to the provisions of this treaty, persons whom in the requesting state have charged with or found guilty of an extraditable offense. All right. So the question is, well, was Sam charged with an extraditable offense? Let's see. Article 2 defines that for us. What is an extraditable offense? Paragraph 1 tells us, an offense shall be an extraditable offense if it is punishable under the laws of both countries, right, both states, by deprivation of liberty for a period of more than 1 year or by a more severe penalty, right? So if in other words, if SBF could get jail or get prison more than 1 year in the Bahamas and in the United States, boom, right? It satisfies that element. Also shall be an extraditable offense if it consists of an attempt or a conspiracy to attempt, aiding, abetting, counseling, causing the commission of being an accessory to, before, or after the fact, anything described in paragraph 1. All right. So it's not even the original charge, right? So let's say, so Sam, as we know, he got charged with wire fraud, right? The actual offense, which is this, an actual offense. But he also got charged with a conspiracy offense because he also conspired. He committed a bunch of wire fraud. He conspired to do a whole lot more. And there was a conspiracy that committed the underlying wire fraud. Right. So all of this matters, but they're saying that both of those offenses, because what you don't want to have happen is somebody be able to prove that the underlying offense didn't happen, but the conspiracy did. And then if this paragraph were not there, they would not be extraditable because they would beat the underlying offense. It says that for the purposes of this article, an offense shall be extraditable, whether or not the laws in the contracting states place the offense within the same category of offenses, or if they describe it by the same terminology. Okay, so like the United States can call it wire fraud, but the Bahamas could call it, theft of digital assets or something, conspiracy to steal or repurpose funds, right? Doesn't have to be the same thing. They're close enough. Whether or not the offense is one for which the U.S. requires the showing of interstate transportation, doesn't really matter. We can use that to establish jurisdiction. Okay. An offense described in the article shall be extraditable whether or not the offense was committed within the territory of the requesting state. Yeah, so that's a good one, right? So this is important because if SBF is in the Bahamas and, court jurisdiction, a lot of court jurisdiction is geographic. right? So in Arizona, we've got Maricopa County. We've talked a lot about that with the Kerry Lake lawsuit yesterday. And Kerry Lake is in Maricopa County. And there are, many other counties. And they're within the territory of the requesting state. But in Arizona, our courts are geographically set up. Okay, so in Maricopa County, we have one Maricopa County Superior Court. When you go down to Tucson, when you go over to Yuma, when you go to Pima County, when you go to Coconino County, they have their own Superior Court. So here they're saying, well, even if SBF was outside of the physical geographic region, doesn't matter, right? He probably wasn't in the Southern District of New York when he committed many of these offenses. He was down in the Bahamas. So they say that doesn't matter, okay? He can commit the offense in the Bahamas if New York has some other jurisdictional reason, not the physical territory, they can still get him back. However, if the offense was committed outside the territory of the requesting state, extradition shall be granted if the law of the requested state provides punishment for an offense committed outside of its territory in similar circumstances, right? So if you could charge him in New York, right? In other words, if New York has jurisdiction, or the SEC has jurisdiction, or the CFTC has jurisdiction, then they're saying that they'll more or less acknowledge that. Extradition shall not be granted when the following, right? So now what are Sam's lawyers going to be diving into? SBF's defense lawyers are like sitting here. They're going through this the same way we are. They're going, crap. They're going to try to get him out of here. What should we do about this? So Sam's lawyers are like, all right, they say we can't get him out of here, so we got to put him under one of these buckets. You can't do it if the offense for which extradition is requested is an offense of a political character. Oh, that's a curious one. That's a pretty big generic bucket, isn't it? You can say, he could easily make that argument. He could say, no, I mean, the Republicans want to blast me. I'll be a political martyr if the Republicans extradite me. They'll get me, they'll lock me up for 1 million years because they know I gave $1 billion to the Democrats. So if it was political, maybe he can use that as a defense. Also, not extraditable when the executive authority of the requested state, so this would be, I guess, the president, determines that the request was made for this would be the Bahamas. The primary purpose was for prosecuting or punishing a person for an offense of a political character. Right? So if they make this guy into a political martyr, you see where this is going? So they could make this a Republican political martyr. They could say, no, this is, or a Democratic martyr. They could say that the U.S. government really wants this guy. Democrats, Republicans are going to, skewer him. And so they think it's political and he's a political, exile. No extradition if the executive authority of the Bahamas determines that it was politically or racially motivated. If the request, the following offenses shall not be considered to be offenses of a political character, right? So now Sam's going to try to get into the political character protection, right? That's the exception against extradition. But they say this is clearly not. If it's a murder or a willful crime against the head of state or that person's family. Okay, that makes sense. An offense. So like if you try to murder. So the Bahamas are saying if Sam Bankman-Fried had tried to murder somebody in the Bahamas, like a head of state of the Bahamas, then they're not going to extradite that person. Okay, the United States can say we want Sam, but they'll say, no, he tried to murder somebody here. So we're not giving you back him. All right, sorry. If an offense with respect to the contracting state is to prosecute pursuant to a multilateral treaty, the executive authority of the requested state may refuse it if they're not ordinary offenses, so military law stuff. Extradition shall not be refused on the ground that the fugitive is a citizen or national of the requested state. And they also have Article 5. They say no extradition when the person sought has been convicted in the requested state for the offense for which extradition is requested. Okay, that makes sense. So this is saying that if he got convicted in the Bahamas, right? So in other words, if he's been convicted of wire fraud in the Bahamas and the U.S. wants to bring him in for wire fraud, They'll say, well, he was already convicted of wire fraud here. That's good enough for there. So you don't get him. Not precluded by the fact that the competent authorities in the requested state have decided not to prosecute or to discontinue any criminal proceedings which have not been instituted. Extradition shall not be granted when all prosecution has become barred by a lapse of time according to the laws in the requesting state. Yeah, so this is called the statute of limitations, right? You have to bring charges within a certain period of time. Like in a DUI case, for example, right? If it's a misdemeanor in Arizona, they got to bring charges within 1 year. If they don't bring it within 1 year, well, then they lose the right to do that because you want to incentivize the government to prosecute people. You don't want them to say, you committed a DUI 25 years ago and we like to prosecute you today. You go, what? What are you talking about? Right? So there's a limit. And they're saying if that would have expired, obviously that hasn't happened. This is all relatively new. Capital punishment. So if they're asking for the death penalty, it adds some complexities. Nobody's asking for the death penalty, at least legally, yet. Also, extradition procedures. So this is how it will formally work. The requests for extradition shall be made through diplomatic channels. The request shall be supported by documents, statements, other evidence which describe the identity, the probable location of the person sought, in this case, Sam. A statement of the facts, including, if the possible, the time, location of the offense. They'll get that all from the indictment. A statement of the provisions of the law describing the essential elements. Again, the indictment. Same here. Elements of the offense. The time limit on the prosecution. That's probably not in the indictment. I don't remember it being in there. But that would be the time limit they would just get from New York or from federal law. A request for extradition relating to a person not convicted shall also be supported by, all right, so they want a copy of the warrant of the arrest, no problem. They should be able to get that. The evidence as would justify the committal for trial, or if the person had been committed. So they want some actual evidence. Interesting. A request for extradition relating to a person convicted of the offense. So he has not been convicted, so this doesn't apply. All documents shall be submitted in English. They wanted in English down there. And documents in support of the request shall be transmitted through the diplomatic channels as required by law. Now, if the executive authority of the Bahamas considers that the information furnished in support of the request is not sufficient, it shall request more info. We're allowed to do that. And the executive authority of the Bahamas may fix a time limit for that information. So we can say, look, if you really want Sam, get us all these materials within the next 30 days, or else the answer is no. Nothing in the foregoing shall prevent the executive authority of the requested state from presenting the court the information or evidence. In a case of urgency, either the contracting state, so the United States, may request the provisional arrest of any person accused of an extraditable offense. So that may be what happened. We don't know. Application for provisional arrest shall be made through the diplomatic channels, right? So did the State Department contact the Bahamas? Or directly between the DOJ and the Attorney General or Interpol. The application for the provisional arrest, right? So it's almost like a secondary arrest warrant. Literally, the description of the person sought, the location of the person sought, so SBF. A brief statement of the facts of the case, including, if possible, the location of the offense, which was all over the country, the world. A statement of the existence of a warrant, the statement of request for extradition, so they want sort of like a brief narrative. Once they get the application, the state will take the appropriate request, notify the results, so they'll notify the United States. Here, a person who is provisionally arrested, which this may be where Sam is, shall be discharged from custody upon the expiration of 60 days from the date of the arrest. Yeah, and that would put us in February, right? The fact that the person sought has been discharged shall not prejudice. There's a decision and a surrender. Prompt communication between all the entities. If the request is denied, the requested state shall provide an information for the reason for the denial. If it's granted, they'll agree on a time, place, and location for the surrender. If the person is not removed from the Bahamas within the time prescribed by the law, they may be released from custody, right? So in other words, they'll say that, yep, approved. well, you can have him. Come and get him. If you don't come and get him, we're going to release him. If the extradition request is granted and the person is being prosecuted, unless otherwise provided, they're going to surrender that person. And you can see the rest of this is talking about property. If the person sought agrees in writing to be surrendered, after being advised of his rights, he can agree to this. So yeah, so SBF doesn't actually have to fight any of this. All he has to do is just agree. But his lawyers are saying he doesn't agree. The right of the parties and the property shall be respected. Transit, the request for transit shall also come through diplomatic channels. No authorization is required for air transportation. Obviously, it's the Bahamas, so if you need to schedule a flight, you can do that. The requested state shall advise and appear in court on behalf of the requesting state. So the Bahamas will pay for some of this, but the requesting state shall bear the expenses. So it's going to cost the U.S. a bunch of money in order to get him extradited, of course. Neither state shall make any pecuniary claim. This treaty shall apply to extraditable offenses, and it's ratified and entered into full force. You can see who signed off on this. Back in 1990, we have somebody from the U.S. who signed it and somebody from the Bahamas who signed it. Very interesting treaty. All right, so basically what this means, my friends, is, in order to initiate criminal proceedings in the United States, we have a formal process, right? You have to have an information, an indictment, a criminal complaint. There needs to be enough probable cause in order to believe that there are charges that are worth bringing. Now, in this situation, right, the Bahamas are sort of asking for the government of the United States to provide all of that to them. Presumably, they have a same and similar process where they also say, all right, you say this person committed a crime. Well, we've got a lot of questions about this. We have a question about this and this and this. And it's basically the same elements that you would get in the United States, right? It's the same type of stuff. So the U.S. government, I can't imagine, is going to have a difficult time on this. The only area that I saw that might be a defense would be the political, exile, the political martyr, somebody who is like a refugee kind of a situation. And that is probably what his lawyers are going to latch into. So if I had to, if we saw any official filings from his lawyers, I think it's going to be all about this. They're going to say he's a political refugee and he can't be extradited. Otherwise, there'll be some catastrophic problems. So I don't expect him to remain in the Bahamas. I'd fully expect him to be extradited. And when he is, then the actual proceedings will take place in the Southern District of New York. And of course, we'll come back and cover that as well. But we've got to check in with the reaction. Of course, Maxine Waters is on the House Finance Committee, and she's asking a lot of questions about this. The White House had something to say. Kevin O'Leary had something to say. And nobody really wants to talk a whole lot about it. But we'll talk about the White House and their reaction in a minute, right after we hear about our sponsors of the program, our friends over at 4 Patriots. My friends, a food shortage could be coming. Even in the United States, experts have written about this as recently as July. Drought, inflation, even new policies are pushing America's food supply near its breaking point. That's why survival food is more important now than ever. And you can create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriot survival food kits ever. This is not ordinary food. We're talking about good for 25 years super survival food, hand-packed right in family-owned facilities in the United States, giving jobs to over 200 Americans. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water-resistant, and they stack easily. They have different delicious breakfast, lunches, and dinners, and you can make these meals in less than 20 minutes. Just add boiling water, simmer, and serve. And right now, you can go to 4patriots.com. Use code Robert to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including this 3-month survival kit. You'll get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. They're called 4 Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Go to 4patriots.com. Use code Robert to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com. Use code Robert. Start building your own stockpile today. That's right, my friends. Don't starve to death out there. Times are getting scary. Russia's pointing nuclear bombs at us. We all got to be careful. And so thanks to our friends at 4 Patriots. Now, we've got reaction to get to because the White House is responding to SBF's arrest, or should I say rather, not responding. Hey, Karine Jean-Pierre, you know SBF, somebody who donated a ton of money to the Democrats, was just arrested. He gave some money to Joe Biden, your boss. Anything to say about that?
The former FTX Bank Freedom was arrested in the Bahamas. The president received campaign donations, campaign donation from him. Many prominent Democrats did, some Republicans did as well. Will the president return that donation? Does he call on all politicians who got campaign donations that may have come from customer money to return those funds?
So look, I'm covered here by the Hatch Act, limited on what I can say, and anything that's connected to political contributions from here, I would have to refer you to the DNC.
I'm not asking the president's opinion, though. Does he want those people who...
No, you asked me two questions. You asked me about will he return the donations, and then you asked me about his opinion. I'm answering the first part, which is... What about the
second one?
I'm covered by the Hatch Act from here. I'm limited to what I can say, and I just can't talk to political contributions or anything related to that. I cannot speak about it from here.
And his opinion, though?
I just cannot speak to this from here. Even his opinion, even his thoughts about the contributions, donations, I cannot speak about that from here.
And then are you covered by the Hatch Act?
I am covered by the Hatch Act, which I'm happy to say over and over again because we believe in the rule of law here.
Yeah, you sure do. Yeah, that's why you just kind of crap all over the Constitution every time you can. Courts even agree with that one. So she is using that little escape hatch. The Hatch Act escape hatch is very convenient for her. She'll pull that card out anytime there's something she doesn't want to answer. Hatch Act, got one. What a ridiculous joke. Now, of course, it's very easy, right? If you're Joe Biden and you're a Democrat who got, I don't know, $1 million or I don't know, $5 million, and it was stolen customer money, wouldn't the easy answer to be to just say, yeah, it's very convenient. We'll just, sure, we'll give all of that money back. It's not even a complicated question. And I think there were other people who have done this already. In fact, I thought that Beto has already done this. In fact, he did. So why, if Beto can do it, why can't Biden do it? This was reported over from Houston. Beto returned a $1 million check from FTX's SBF. O'Rourke gave the money back before the company's scandals became public because they were taken aback by such a large unsolicited donation. Oh, they didn't even, so they go, that's weird. $1 million came in. So shout out to Beto for actually figuring that one out. Yeah, they didn't even take it. What about that other money? All of it. Chris Evans, spokesman, said the reimbursement was one of the largest checks ever. He said the money which was received was returned because the donation was unsolicited. They didn't even want it. Sam is just like, here, hey, Beto, have $1 million. Here, have another $1 million. The contribution was unsolicited. The campaign upcoming commission report will show it was returned on November 4th prior to the news stories that came out. So a lot of other money went out there. How much of it was also unsolicited? And why can't the Biden administration just give it back? Karine Jean-Pierre doesn't want to answer that question. It's all the Hatch Act. Yeah, very convenient. All right, so there's other people who have questions about this, and Maxine Waters doesn't really want to hear from them. A very nice gentleman just had a simple question about the financial catastrophe known as FTX, and Maxine Waters wasn't having it.
Record the closing statements from Ranking Member McHenry and myself. And I'd like to thank you, Mr. John Ray III.
Chairwoman Waters.
For your presence here today.
Chairwoman Waters, I've not had an opportunity to testify or to question the witness.
Look at that face. She's mad. He's questioning me.
I'd like to thank you for your presence.
Chairwoman Waters.
And for the time.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Are all members entitled to question witnesses?
You are, and if you would like to miss the votes on the floor for everybody.
Hey, it's the chairwoman's prerogative to call a recess.
1 moment, please.
That's your decision, not mine.
Just 1 moment, please.
I'd love to.
You may go right ahead and have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're certainly welcome, sir.
You're certainly welcome, sir. Look at how upset everybody was at this poor gentleman. Shout out to Mr. Gooden over here. Mr. Gooden is trying to just get some questions answered, man. And she and look at everybody. So first of all, Maxine Waters looks to her left and she asks her staff assistant, whoever this person is, maybe this is another representative. I mean, presumably it's sitting right to her left. Waters looks over to her left and says, why is this peasant, Representative Gooden, asking a question? Why is he interrupting me? I'm reading from my written piece of paper that somebody else drafted for me. And take a look at this lady to Miss Waters, her right as well. She does a little eye roll in this whole saga, right? This is a shameful behavior.
Record the closing statements from Ranking Member McHenry and myself. And I'd like to thank you, Mr. John Ray III.
Chairwoman Waters.
For your presence here today.
Chairwoman Waters.
How dare you?
I've not had an opportunity to testify or to question the witness.
Who is this person? Who is this peasant?
I'd like to thank you for your presence.
Chairwoman Waters.
No, so she didn't even acknowledge him. She just started talking right back to the witness. Didn't even acknowledge him, so he has to interrupt her again. Now take a look at this lady over here. She's getting sort of wound up. She knows something's coming. It's going to be a juicy one.
Further time.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Oh, right there. Look the eye roll. Oh, look, she eye roll. Oh, there it is. Oh, busted. Who is that? Yeah. Parliamentary inquiry. Who is this idiot asking questions? Ugh, what a loser. Here, look at her face.
Chairwoman Waters.
And further time.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Are all members
She mouths, oh my God, too. She goes, oh my God.
entitled to question witnesses?
You are, and if you would like to miss the votes on the floor for everybody.
Hey, it's
just
the
one
chairwoman's
moment.
prerogative to call a
Just
recess.
1 moment, please.
You don't have to exit us, Maxine. You don't have to call a recess right now. It's 5 minutes. I'm on the floor. I'm allowed to ask questions. Why are you ending the hearing when we're just getting started? I haven't had an opportunity to ask anything. And we got a little smirk over here.
That's your decision, not mine.
Just 1 moment, please. You may go right ahead and have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
You're
Madam
certainly
Chair.
welcome, sir.
And you're certainly welcome, sir. Man, she's having a conversation with this dude over here too now. Now they're talking. What a loser. Why is he wanting to ask questions? Oh, Maxine's going to be so mad. She's going to need like 3 cups of coffee after this is over.
Ahead and have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're certainly welcome, sir.
All right. So, okay. That's what's going on in Congress. I don't know if they're on opposite teams or who that gentleman is. Let's see. Rep. Gooden. Rep. Gooden is Lance Gooden. 1982 American serving the great state of Texas from Texas' 5th Congressional District. His district includes Eastern Dallas, and he is of the Republican Party. Okay, so that's why she's unhappy with him. So Maxine Waters doesn't like him one bit because he had some actual questions to ask. And, of course, that will be fun to continue to watch Maxine Waters, kissy face Maxine, blowing kisses to SBF. Now, we also have this clip. Mr. Wonderful in front of Congress, still defending SBF, saying, you know, there was a war going on. They were trying to take Sam out. Cut the kid some slack.
Why do you believe FTX failed? I have an opinion. I don't have the records. Here it is. These two behemoths that own the unregulated market together and grew these incredible businesses in terms of growth were at war with each other. And one put the other out of business intentionally. Now, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe there's nothing wrong with love and war. But finance is a massive, unregulated, global monopoly now.
Whoa. Binance's fault.
They put FTX out of business.
Wow. So that's not FTX's fault.
Monopoly
He's
now.
blaming Binance for taking out FTX. All right. Well, see how that works out for him. Now, I don't necessarily think that may actually be true. That doesn't exonerate SBF or FTX. It's business, right? He should know that better than anybody. But to say that they're at war, right? The next statement here is that they're unregulated. Don't blame Sam, right? The whole thing's unregulated. So how can you punish somebody who's operating in this wild, wild west arena? Which is interesting. Now, Kevin O'Leary is also kind of the only person defending him. I think that's also interesting. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I haven't seen a good, cohesive, sort of logical defense assembled, but maybe we have one. Of course, we know that SBF was supposed to appear in front of Congress, and he got arrested very conveniently right before that happened. But he did prepare some remarks that he was evidently going to disclose to everybody. And I wanted to show where that came from. So that was something that Forbes actually got. And this is the report. December 13th, Forbes has the exclusive transcripts. The full testimony that Bankman-Fried planned to give before Congress. They got their hands on this. Stephen Ehrlich over at Forbes. He says Forbes obtained a copy of the testimony and we're publishing it here verbatim. You can also read the top takeaways and everyone he planned to blame in his remarks in the aftermath of FTX and the implosion. And so let's go through this in detail. Sam Bankman-Fried's summary from his prepared remarks to Congress. He says, or would have said, America, Congress, I would like to start by formally stating under oath I effed up. And was he going to use that profanity in the people's house? He says, I know that it doesn't mean much to say that I'm sorry, and I'm dedicating myself to as much as I can to doing right by my customers. When all is said and done, I'll judge myself primarily by one metric: whether I have eventually been able to make customers whole. If I fail our customers in this regard, I have failed myself. Sam says, or was going to say, that last year my net worth was valued at $20 billion. Today, I would be wrong to say that I have nothing. I have a loving family, I have food on my plate, and that's more than life has given billions of people. It says, but as last I saw, I believe my bank account now has $100,000 in it. I don't know for sure because I have been denied access to many of my own personal passwords, data, documents, and accounts. And as of today, I and many other members of FTX's international former management team are missing access to key data. So he can't comment on a bunch of stuff that could help inform customers and inform the team and inform the regulators. Nearly all of this data is held by John J. Ray III, the Chapter 11 team. In fact, many of us are still missing access to our own personal data, which is being held hostage by the Chapter 11's team leadership. Oh, gosh. When we have asked for access to our own personal data and passwords, an example response reads, you should take steps, as we've suggested to others in the same position, to reset your passwords for any relevant accounts, they say. So poor Sam doesn't have access to his passwords. Now, as such, he says, much of my testimony is less confident and detailed than I would want it to be. And I apologize if I'm unable to confidently answer completely reasonable questions. I unfortunately cannot access most of FTX's current or historical data right now to confirm my understanding, right? So all of this is like a pre-buttal, okay? He's sort of he's trying to remove questions from the field. He's just telling them, right? If you ask me certain things, I'm just going to tell you I don't know. It's in the first page, right? There's a whole category, a black hole of data that I don't have access to. He says, I also cannot access most of my own notes, my writings, my spreadsheets, data, or email. Mr. Ray's team, who we talked all about yesterday, has even refused to return to me my credentials for purely personal accounts. Yeah, bro, because they think you have your seed phrases hidden somewhere. They think that you're going to log in to your Gmail, see an email that you sent to yourself or something that's got a bunch, 35 different words in there. You'll know what your seed phrase is, and boom, you've got access to a couple $2 billion. They're concerned. It says, I deeply regret giving in to pressure to sign forms that precipitated the Chapter 11 filing. What? Just a few days after FTX became potentially insolvent. He regrets the whole thing. Among other things, the Chapter 11 team was thrust into a very difficult situation. And I worry that they were given very misleading information by a few members of the FTX US team when they joined. They are trying to manipulate and manage multiple complex global entities and systems without support from many of the teams who used to run them. I believe it would be extremely hard, if not impossible, for the Chapter 11 team to move forward constructively without working cooperatively with many foreign jurisdictions that have regulatory and operational control. Right? So in other words, he wants to still be involved. He does not want this to have, he didn't want this to have been turned over. And he's unhappy with John J. Ray. He says, I have offered many times to help the team. And to cite just one example, I would have been able to easily collect some pieces of data that they expressed the inability to find in their court filings. I have not received responses to those offers or to any other messages I have sent them. Yeah, I mean, good Lord. It's like nobody trusts you. It's like, it would be like having Jim Baker involved in the Twitter file. It'd be like having Jim Baker review his own files before he sent them over to Barry Weiss. Oh, wait, he did that. Yeah. It would be the same thing here, though. It would be ridiculous. Yeah. Can you tell us what these spreadsheets say when you have a history of manipulating every other document that you've ever touched? Sam says, I reached out to Mr. Ray and the Chapter 11 team numerous times. And sometimes I've been requesting access to my own data, but other times I've been attempting to alert them to potential information that they need for their jobs. He says, I've sent 5 emails to Mr. Ray, and he never responded, nor has he even reached out to me to communicate in other ways. He's not returning your phone calls. Yeah. All right. That's a bummer, I guess. Now, he has not responded, for instance, to an email of mine that said, I have potentially pertinent information concerning future opportunities and financing for FTX. Right? He says, I would love to talk to you, whether it's via phone or email, so I can help you. But to the best of my knowledge, FTX US, he says, remains solvent and could pay off all of its customers in full tomorrow. So the US customers are good. Unfortunately, the Chapter 11 team has frozen FTX US, blocking customers. The customers who have lost assets are those who traded on FTX International, which do not accept US residents. My primary focus right now is to do right by the customers of FTX International. I am fighting to make these customers whole, and I will keep doing that. That's my path forward. He says, I do believe there is credible path forward to putting together billions of dollars of additional funds that would involve significant external financing. Man, that happened this morning too. Thank you, everybody. Doing so would be significantly easier if the Chapter 11 team worked comparatively with foreign jurisdictions that have regulatory authority over its subsidiaries. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Now, I have heard complaints that the Chapter 11 team is refusing to respond to certain inquiries, and he says, and it's been a month, and I don't even have access to my LinkedIn account, right? I can't even access my InMail. I have a duty towards the colleagues and supporters who fought for FTX day after day. So Sam tells us a little bit about what happened. All right. And this goes on for 18 pages. So we'll see how much we can get through. But he says, what happened? The reconstruction of events concerns FTX International. I started Alameda in 2017, non-crypto exchange. There was reconstructing the events of 2021. He says, I'm relying on memory, so I don't know a ton of information. He says, FTX is a derivatives exchange licensed in a bunch of countries. He says, over the past year, markets crashed. Alameda's assets went to zero. And he was planning on presenting this all to Congress. Oh, gosh. They would have been drooling over themselves by this page. He would have never gotten through all of this. I believe that Alameda was under leveraged or over leveraged, right? They had no assets. Early November, there was a major decline, 50%. All the books were off, right? Liquidity minus $8 billion. This put extreme pressure on FTX. Alameda was not able to deliver sufficient liquidity. So Sam was going to tell Congress, what went wrong. He says a large number of things had to go wrong for this to happen. But I was running FTX, and it was ultimately my responsibility. He says that Alameda became insolvent when the economic environment changed. A run on the bank, which is what Mr. O'Leary was just talking about, meant that FTX had only a few days to right the ship. There were a bunch of hedge funds that failed. Alameda Research was not sufficiently hedged. There was different uses of capital that went bad. There were internal control problems. You can see FTX's dashboard for users did not display their full position. We already looked at a bunch of the indictments and the complaints and the filings here, and they are going through this sort of line by line, and they are explaining the depth of the insufficiencies. Risk management was problematic. Alameda's assets fell precipitously. Around November 8th, we agreed with CZ from Binance on a deal, but that didn't go through. $3 billion of the capital was used a few months later. Right? So we've covered a lot of this. But this is where he talks about himself. He says, for the above to go wrong, I, Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO, had to make a number of significant mistakes, he says. I believe that the thread that most ties them together is that for much of 2022, I was less grounded in operational details than I had been before. I prided myself on staying grounded, staying in the weeds day to day of the company. But by mid-2022, I believe I was spending approximately 25% of my time talking to regulators and policymakers in DC. I spent another 25% of my time on branding and new pathways, including remittances, and I spent another 25% of my time on the workforce. Together, those were maybe 25% of my time in 2020, but by 2022, they were closer to 75%. That's where I lost control of the product. I pride myself on having strong work ethic. I began FTX by working 18-hour days. But for much of 2022, I was working about 30% less than I used to. So he was kind of, living lavishly. And even when I was working, I was less focused and disciplined. Yeah. Things get late, you get lazy sometimes. Now, I thought that I could hold FTX together despite the expansion. I was wrong. I bit off more than I can chew, and I ended up failing to focus on risk. I deeply regret I deeply regret what happened, he says. I would give anything to be able to go back and put in place the detailed oversight and the risk management that I should have. But right now, I'm focusing on what I can do to make customers whole and reflecting on what I did wrong. There are a number of things I'd wish I'd done. Among those, I wish I'd operated FTX with a high degree of transparency. He says, we were transparent about market data, but we were not transparent about risk. I didn't follow anything. I wish we built out public monitors that displayed total client balances, blockchain balances. He wishes that he had more dashboards, I guess. And he was going to optimize his software. He says, I wish that when cracks began to show, I'd communicated openly with our employees instead of freezing up and remaining mostly quiet, per lawyers' instructions as people wondered what was happening. That the lawyers were telling him to shut up. And he obviously didn't listen to them. He's been running his mouth big time. I wish I had not clicked on a button on DocuSign at 4:30 a.m., leaving some of FTX under destructive leadership. Oh, he is pissed. And I deeply regret not taking advice of employees and supporters who knew what Chapter 11 would mean for customers. I received a call from a regulatorily experienced advisor who I deeply trust and respect shortly before the 4:30 a.m. call, imploring me not to do it. What they said felt correct to me. I talked with my counsel, who strongly pushed back. In retrospect, I can confidently say that they were right and my now ex-counsel was wrong. Man, so he doesn't even want to be in this situation. He's like, I should have kept control of the company. And more than anything else, I wish I had remained grounded and spent at least as much time focusing on and safeguarding user assets as I did on branding and partnerships. So he is not, that's not going to go over well, I think, with the courts. He's like zero remorse there at all. He's like, I'd actually still be in charge if I could. Now, between November 6th and November 10th, Sam says, I received a large number of calls from prospective investors, many of them potentially interested in contributing more than $1 billion of financing. On November 8th, I was put under extreme pressure to file for Chapter 11. Most of it came from this lawyer, Ryan Miller, general counsel of FTX US and a former partner. He represented FTX. He says, I have 19 pages of screenshots from Sullivan and Cromwell and others. Wow. Saying that they were influenced by them, all sent over a 2-day period, pressuring me to quickly file Chapter 11. They ranged from adamant to mentally unbalanced. They also called many of my friends, coworkers, family members, and they pressured them to pressure me to file, some of whom were emotionally damaged by the pressures. Some of them came to me crying. So he is, he's trying to say that he was unduly influenced on this, that he didn't want to do any of this stuff. Lawyers pressured him. Okay. Think of this in criminal law. If somebody pressures you to take a plea deal, they say, you got to plead guilty to this thing, man. If we go to trial and you lose, you're going to go to prison for 1,000,000 years and you have to do this and you have to do that, right? The judges, before they accept that, they say to this person, do you know what you're doing? Have you taken any drugs or alcohol? Did anybody promise you anything not contained in this plea deal? Do you trust your lawyer? Did he do a good job for you? Judges will ask them that. All right, you're knowingly doing this? You're voluntarily doing this? You're sure you're not on drugs? No, man, I'm not on drugs. All right. They go through this entire speech in order to get it done. But this guy, right? And if you don't, right? If there really was pressure, like if you come back on that plea deal and your lawyer was like, yeah, like I was going to, I told him I was going to push him off a bridge if he didn't take this plea deal, or something like that. Yeah, you can get out of a plea deal. And so Sam is doing the same thing. He's basically trying to say I was unduly pressured, unduly influenced to even sign these documents in the first place. Says it was only later that I was informed that it was very unusual for such a significant filing to be made so quickly. He says the lawyers chose John Ray to run the team. During the time I was pressured to file, Sullivan and the lawyers told me, my counsel, that I would get to choose the board chair, but they silently reneged that. 4:30 a.m. against my better judgment, Sam says, I clicked on the DocuSign link that would nominate John Ray as CEO. Less than 10 minutes later, I received a personal funding offer for billions of dollars to help make customers whole. Where'd that money come from? Who wanted to put that money up? 10 minutes later? Who is that? A few minutes thereafter, I instructed my lawyer to rescind the document. He wants to revoke the Chapter 11 filings. It had become clear to me that that was not the best way forward. So that dude had a bad 30 minutes right there. My counsel informed me a few minutes later, sorry, too late to rescind it. You already signed it. Lawyers are submitting it on my behalf despite my instructions not to. 6 hours later, more than ample time to change course, lawyers filed the document with the court against my wishes and stated orders. That's very interesting. All right. That is very, very interesting. If that's true, right, he can say, right, if he sent an email to them, I reject this, I undo it, right? Now he's got another claim against his lawyers. And yeah, I don't know how that's going to work out. Now he's in jail and he doesn't have a lot of access to funds. And, right, if at our law firm, okay, this has happened, right? Somebody signs a contract. They say, okay, I'd love to work with your law firm. You sound great. All right. We sign the documents. Okay. We've got court the next day and somebody calls in and they say, hey, guess what? I met another lawyer who I like better than you. We say, that's impossible, first of all, but okay, that's fine. What would you like to do? They'd say, well, I'd like to refund the money and we'd like to, go with the other lawyers. No problem. Happy to. Okay, great. I'm glad that you found somebody that you can work with well. We want you to be comfortable if you found somebody more comfortable. Okay, great. So yes, okay, we shred the fee agreement, give them back their money. That's it. So, right. And because that's kind of the right thing to do because the client has expressed they don't want to work with you anymore. The client has terminated that relationship or given you a direct order. And in this case, right, if that happened, if they're just processing these paperwork, all these lawyers are scrambling around in this office, they're like, oh, perfect. We just got Sam's signed agreement. And then they say, oh, but he just sent an email 20 minutes later saying he wants to revoke that. And everybody's looking around. They're like, I didn't see that email. Did you see that email from Sam? No, I didn't see it. I didn't see it at all. I was too busy working on this new agreement that came in. So no, I didn't see it. You didn't see it, right? Nope, didn't see it either. You? Nope. Okay. Right. And they all file the documents. Now, of course, this is SBF, who is, probably a sociopath and, a gigantic fraudster who's making these claims, but it's still interesting, right? He's saying that his lawyers went against his direct orders and, lawyers are not supposed to do that traditionally. After John filed for Chapter 11 for all of the entities, including a fully solvent U.S. entity, FTX, in which they shut down customer access and withdrawals, his team appointed legal counsel. They say that he's famously known, John Ray, we talked about him, he's John J. Ray III, was known for his work at Enron. They recommended him to manage FTX. Law firms were paid roughly $700 million in fees from Enron that otherwise would have gone to creditors, right? So he's saying now that the lawyers just wanted the money. They just want this case closed. They just want to be appointed as the CEO. They know they're going to make a boatload of money. So to summarize, to the best of my knowledge, when Enron, says Sam, went through the Chapter 11 process, John Jay and S&C were both lawyers of the state. They got paid $700 million. Okay, so he's saying that they made a bunch of money, so they're conflicted off, right? And these are sort of ad hominem attacks now. He's saying that these guys are corrupt. They've got conflicts of interest because they're going to make a boatload of money. Not that he wrecked, $40 billion of potential customer funds. That's beside the point. Right. Same thing that Enron did, right? Like these guys got fees because they delivered major value. They went and got a bunch of money back. Now or maybe they didn't. I don't know. Bonnie gave us those numbers on locals. Enron, I think, was less than Madoff. Anyways, the point is he's just attacking the lawyers now. He's saying they are corrupted. They are prejudiced. They're conflicted off. In an official statement, Sam says Ryan Pinder said it's possible that the prospect of a multi-million-dollar legal and consultancy fees is driving the strategy. So he's sharing a story from the New York Post. He's saying even the Bahamas are saying that it's about the fees. He says, I will end this section with a screenshot of a message Mr. Miller sent to much of FTX's leadership 10/23 November 8th. Renee Miller says, I need to wire Sulcom, which is Sullivan Cromwell, $4 million to make sure we are all represented through this. And we preserve any value that is left tomorrow from FTX.com cash. Who can do it? I'm in charge now. From Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller is presumably one of the lawyers. So Sam says, needless to say, Cromwell have not made sure we're all represented through this. They've done a good job, however, to make sure they got $4 million. So Sam, he continues on. He says, look, as of today, I'm still aware of billions of dollars of serious offers of financing, including signed letters of intent, billions of dollars that could potentially make customers whole. However, I believe that all of those are conditional on FTX being restarted as an exchange. Wow. So this dude's like holding it almost like it's like a hostage negotiation. Says, I can repay billions of dollars. I can make this whole, but you have to give me back control of my company again. I sincerely hope that all of the global teams working on FTX are seriously considering the possibility, because I would drive a large amount of value to customers and their creditors. However, I admit I'm not optimistic about some parts of the process. I have not myself witnessed any progress with Mr. Ray's team. And they said, referencing my plans, that a capital raise was a 0% likelihood. They said, in response to my desire to keep FTF active, they say, Mr. Miller said, hey, Sam, there's nothing to save, brother. It's all gone. He writes, I understand that the Chapter 11 team has been placed in a complex situation, and I regret placing them there. I regret the oversight. I have heard very good things about the members of the team, especially from others. I believe that they could be extremely valuable members of a more global process forward for FTX. So he's basically just pissed that he's cut out of the process. He says, they took my company away from me. I can handle it better than you guys can. Give me my company back. I was improperly induced into signing over the documents. And these people are corrupt and they only care about money. Okay. So basically everything that he did, everything he's accusing them of being, he certainly did, right? He stole a bunch of money. He had conflicts of interest. He was corrupt as can be. He wrecked his company, not them. They're stepping in here to clean up his mess and try to save his butt. And he's pretty ungrateful about it. So he talks about international jurisdictions. We'll fast forward through there. FTX US, he's saying, they're solvent, but John J. Ray became the CEO and suspended withdrawals. I do not believe the process has been appropriate for FTX US. He says, now I've made a number of statements over the process, which I believe are inaccurate or substantially misleading. Yeah, that's a pretty big admission. So are you saying that some of your statements were fraudulent? Gosh, it would have been a big problem if he said all this stuff out loud for him. It's weird that they didn't allow him to do that. If he came out and said I was lying about all of this stuff, right, that's a problem. He said, I made numerous assertions. No, these aren't his statements. These are their statements. So retract all of that. Not my statements, their statements, a number of statements. Okay. He says that he's challenging John Jay's statements. He says, I think that the Chapter 11 team has overstepped its mandate. People should not have been removed. I believe the assets should be appropriately divvied out. He says, I believe the current team is putting in heroic effort to manage the business. But now he's just challenging, basically the work that they're doing, right? So here's a big pie chart. Global customer distribution, the various silos. He says, during this process, many people have made accusations against me. Some of them, including, for instance, that I exhibited poor risk management as oversight of CEO. He says, some are true, but many are not. He says, claims have been made that I personally or through an entity attempted to manipulate the stablecoin Tether, which crashed. This is categorically false. No, wait, has that crashed? I've never attempted to manipulate the price. I'm not aware of any activity. One such accusation was made by Binance CEO CZ. And he's got some text messages that he's sharing here. All right, let's see if there's any. I can't even hardly read them. So he puts those text messages in there. He says, I categorically deny any claims of manipulating Tether. I would like to put into the congressional record that claims that I manipulated Tether are false. Okay, nobody cares. You manipulated everything else. Nobody cares about this. Tether, you manipulated your entire company, brother. Thank you for putting on the record that you didn't do it to Tether. Great. Says claims have been made that I tried to cause the implosion of Three Arrows Capital. Also false. False claims about me buying CZ's equity. I never said that either. Claims about this never happened. Claims that I have $1 billion stashed away personally, he says. He says, I'm aware of a bank account which, as best as I can remember, has roughly $100,000 in it. While I've taken loans out of Alameda in my name, as we saw yesterday, $136 million, those were not generally used for personal consumption or savings. Most were used to invest in the business. I believe that they were taken out of Alameda's trading profits and that they were billions of dollars prior to 2022. I was not involved in any of the restructuring of the loans. He says, as a believer in the effective altruism movement, my primary goal has never been personal enrichment. I'm motivated by a commitment to help bring happiness and alleviate suffering of others. My personal charitable contributions started in 2014, and they vastly outstrip what's left in my bank account. I'm not sure I'm going to even be able to pay my legal fees. I'm likely to rack up, not with $100,000 or not, and I'm not sure what to do about that. Going to be tough. I don't know, ask for donations. Maybe start another, you can't even touch crypto. But for now, I'm mostly trying to divert whatever funds of mine I can find away from paying lawyers and towards bringing value back to FTX. Various conspiracy theories involving myself he wants to reject. So he's just upset. He's just like clearing the air. You're all losers. I should have never signed this document. Everybody else is wrong. I'm right. These conspiracy theories about the Ukraine and the DNC. Any theory that I conspired with Ukraine to do anything other than what I stated I was doing about creating pathways for Ukrainians is not just false, but it's deeply offensive. Yeah, so those of you out there who are saying things, improperly maligning SBF for saying he is a fraudulent embezzler of money to the Ukrainians, is really hurting his feelings, and you can't say that. He says that I created a hard partying culture at FTX. He says, no, there was dinner and board games. I didn't even start drinking until I was 21. He says, those of you claiming that I'm Jewish, he says, okay, technically that claim is true. He says, my name is Samuel Benjamin Bankman-Fried. My ancestors mostly arrived at Ellis Island in the first half of the 20th century. He says, I'll leave it to the reader to guess why they came, but I don't need to spell out the implications being made. All right, so he's Jewish. Okay. He says that various theories that I take MSAM for a high or to treat Parkinson's. He says the MSAM patch is never indicated or prescribed for Parkinson's, so the theory is likely the result of lazy internet searches, you idiots. And so Selagen, MSAM's underlying chemical, is sometimes used for Parkinson's in oral form. In case you didn't know, maybe you should look it up on Wikipedia. He says, I have a prescription for that, and I've roughly had that for a decade. I use it daily for on-label use as an antidepressant. It's not generally the case that people are expected to talk about their private medical conditions anyways, you jerks. But enough paparazzi have snapped photos of my belongings and theorized about it online that I guess I have no choice but to tell you the type of medication that I take. He says the last few months have been difficult enough for everyone that it feels unremarkable to me. In comparison, that I need to put the official congressional record that I am, and for most of my adult life have been sad. Oh, man. Oh, man. What? Oh, my gosh. What is he talking about? He says, I have made many mistakes this year, but these are not among them. Man. All right. So the last few months have been difficult for everyone. It feels difficult enough for everyone that it feels unremarkable to me. In comparison, that I need to put on the official congressional record that I am, and for most of my adult life have been sad. Man, so, okay. So this dude is just about as broken as a person can get. And this is like a personal journal, I guess, that he's trying to share with Congress. And it's just it's almost like a manifesto about how wronged he was and how wrong everybody is. Okay. Well, that's that, I guess. So good luck for him. Hopefully that defense works out. I'm not sure that many people are going to buy that or give him a whole lot of sympathy given the direct malicious intent, right? There's crimes that are of moral turpitude, right? There's crimes that people just happen not because they're necessarily bad people, but because they've got some problems, right? Sometimes alcoholics have alcoholism and it's a problem and that causes a DUI. Right? Or somebody drinks too much at a bar in Old Town and they go urinate in public. Criminal offense in Arizona. Right? These are not necessarily crimes of moral turpitude. Some people will ascribe morality to crimes and, they'll say they're immoral. But there are crimes of moral turpitude where you are intentionally trying to screw somebody. You're trying to rob somebody of something, right? You're trying to steal from them. You wake up and you say, I'm going to go take that thing that doesn't belong to me and I'm going to put it in my bank account. Right. And when you do a bunch of that stuff over and over and over and over and over again, and then you turn around and blame everybody else for your maliciousness, well, people have very little sympathy for you. And I think that that's going to be the case with Sam. So bizarre statement. Honestly, I wasn't expecting it to be that weird, but it's pretty weird. He's a weird dude. And if he only has $100,000 and the rest of his lawyers have abandoned ship and he has no access to any funds, yeah, well, he's going to have to go get it from daddy or mommy or from maybe Maxine Waters will give him some. I'm sure she's got a lot of it stashed away somewhere. But that, my friends, is all of the updates on Sam Bankman-Fried. And of course, we'll continue to cover this story because there's going to be a lot more and the charges will come. Thank you for joining us as we do, for hitting that like button and for subscribing, following along wherever it is you are watching this. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.